We have had this 924 turbo for 5 or 6 years. It's an 82 and in mostly stock condition. Has the original 5-lug BBS wheels. Came from Porsche as an option on the turbo cars in 82. We've done quite a bit of work to it, especially on the interior. It was taking in water, so I found a good set of seats for it. Cleaned up the carpet real good. Dash is cracked, but I've put a dash mat on it. The car had been sitting a long time, so I had to go through the complete fuel injection system. Had to put in a used tank. Tank was rusty and leaking. Suspension work. So it's never run quite right because of low compression. So I think we're going to go ahead and rebuild the engine. This is just kind of an overview of what it is now. Obviously needs paint and body work, but the whole plan has been to get the car running properly before we worry about paint and body work, and then we will go from there. Stay tuned. Here's a quick look at the engine in this 82 924 turbo. It's a K-tronic fuel injection system, which is a different beast than the later 944s and 924Ss. The fuel distributor is a common area of problems. We've replaced a lot of the fuel lines with braided steel lines, which is saves from a fire hazard. So I think all that's in order. Also did a lot of work on the vacuum hoses, replaced every single vacuum hose and elbow on this engine, which is substantial. So at this point, the major concern is a lack of compression, which really dictates a rebuild. So wish us luck. Okay, let's get started taking this 924 turbo apart. Thought I'd first show the differences between the 924 and the later 944s. For those of you that have disassembled 944s, this will be interesting. First thing is that the muffler is got a different hanger arrangement that comes off a big bracket on the transmission transaxle, which note that the transaxle is a little bit smaller than the 944 transaxle. We're going to drain the fuel tank. Fuel tank has an inside pump, which I've replaced, and also an exterior pump. It's got 2 pumps, both of which are new. It has an accumulator. You can see that right up there, which is basically a pressure regulator on your main fuel line. The remaining exhaust is fairly similar to 944. Note that this particular car has had some work done here. You can tell by the rusty pipe. You can see the waste pipe for the turbo coming joining, and starter arrangement is pretty similar to 944. And what else shall we note? Also on this car, I've already replaced the rear shocks with Coney adjustables. So not sure if I'm going to move those over to a different car or not. And I've rebuilt the stub axles. So quite a bit of work has been done back here. I'm going to get started first by draining the fuel. Okay, fuel is draining. Doesn't look too bad. It's been in the car for, I don't know, a while. But that replacement tank should be relatively rust-free. You can see now I've got the rear exhaust off that big bracket on the transaxle. All that was pretty straightforward. Next up will be taking loose on the CV axles, and then we get up in there and take loose on the bolts, bolting the transaxle to this front flange. There's a sleeve that connects the torque tube to the transaxle inside that little door. Get that opened up, and then take loose on the mounts, transaxle mounts, which are up top there, and that joker should be ready to come out. Here's that coupler for the torque tube that I was mentioning earlier. You've got a hex screw there, and there's another one in front. Take both those loose and slide it backwards towards the transaxle, and that'll decouple the transaxle from the torque tube. So another thing that has to be done is you got to take the linkage loose from the transaxle. It's just a long rod that goes all the way up to the driver's compartment to the stick shift. Right here I'm showing you a set screw that holds the linkage where it sleeves onto the shifting mechanism on the transaxle. So the reason you have to do that is because it goes all the way through the transaxle. There's a plastic tube. You've got to shove that all the way back and pull the shift rod forward, which is a whole lot of fun because there's a bunch of foam insulation up in the tunnel there. So looking forward to all that. So I've gone back to the exhaust, and because I believe there was a cat in here where this rusty pipe is, it was deleted, and therefore to get this off I'm gonna have to go up and take those nuts loose on the turbo, which generally break, and then once that comes off I should be able to drop that section of pipe. I'll have to also take those nuts loose on the wastegate. Nope, it's got a joint here. So anyway, I can get the bigger pipe off, the exhaust pipe itself, and then deal with the wastegate. By the way, that's a new O2 sensor, so I've taken that out. I'm going to protect it with plastic and secure it out of the way so it doesn't get monkeyed up. So I hit a snag just like I figured I would on this exhaust removal. I was able to get all the wastegate, small 13 millimeters out. That's loose. But what I'm having problems with is up here on the exhaust where it comes out of the turbo. There's I don't know if I can show it to you. There's a one right up there. It's a bolt that goes in, and it's starting to round off. It's seized up. I've tried heating it, and she ain't budging. So may have to get in there with a chisel or something. I got the starter off, no problems there. So, I mean, got to get all this exhaust off to pull the heat shield up there and get access to the torque tube, because it has to be pulled back, and I got to get that shift rod pushed forward. So getting the exhaust off is integral to moving forward. I'll have more for you later. Thanks. Okay, more progress. I was able to get the offending bolt cut off with a Sawzall, just barely enough room to get in there. You can see where I sheared it off right there, and that freed up the rest of the exhaust pipe. So got all that cleared out, got all the heat shielding taken off underneath here, and all the clamps for the exhaust hangers. And here's that insulation I was talking about earlier that I'll have to deal with when I push that shift rod forward. So looks like my phone is getting low on battery power, so I'm going to pick it up later. Thanks. So I got the transaxle out without incident, and here's a view of that. You can see the plastic tubes pulled back and the coupler. But now the problem is the torque tube. I'm trying to pull it back. I've taken off the 4 bolts that secure the torque tube to the bell housing, and the shaft doesn't seem to want to disengage. Would be from the friction plate on the clutch. Also, there's a pin that holds in the clutch fork. It's not wanting to come out, this one right here. But that's typical. They're always corroded and not wanting to come out. So, but I've always had success. That shaft usually pulls out along with the outer tube. I'm not sure why it's binding up. It's probably corroded. I suspect this might be the original clutch on this car. This was a one-owner car when I bought it. So let me keep working on this, and I'll let you know what I did to get that stuff freed up. Okay, I got it. So what was going on was that shaft was in a bind because the engine was leaning forward. Unlike the 944, these 924S's, the engine without the support of the torque tube will lean forward. So I basically just carefully put a floor jack and leveled the engine out. The motor mounts on this thing are towards the back of the engine, unlike the 944, where the motor mounts are more in the center of the engine. So next thing is to extract that pin for the clutch fork, and then I'll see about getting this bell housing off.